Welcome to the Rocks and Oceans podcast, where you'll learn all about living in healthy masculine and feminine balance. We're your hosts, Jamel Harris and Alex Golden. And we made all the relationship mistakes before, so you don't have to.
Fun, connection, abundance, and a whole lot of sexy time will become your daily reality when you choose to step into an aligned way of knowing yourself. No worries if you feel salty and cynical from heartbreak. That's often the most powerful starting point for transformation. Welcome, and we're about to have so much fun together.
Well, welcome to the show, guys. How are y'all doing today?
Hello, hello. Welcome.
Well, today we wanted to come on and talk about what is good communicating.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We know we all communicate, but what we want to talk about today is what is good communicating. Right?
Good
The keyword's
communicating versus defensiveness.
good. Okay, versus defensiveness. All right, fellas, it's gonna be for us.
Well, I think I think it's for everybody. But
we
hey,
got it bad, like Usher.
we might get there too. All right. Well,
What is good communicating? So, what we wanted to talk about today is just that, and we feel like we have a unique perspective. We feel like we communicate pretty well, depending on the topic. Some we communicate it better than others, but we feel like overall we do a good job of communicating and coming back together and having the relationship, on a good space. Which is why we started the podcast, because we want to share that with people.
absolutely. And we wanted to make this some practical tidbits because I think everybody knows that they should be good at communicating, but if we don't learn it at school and we don't learn it at home, then there's a pretty solid chance we didn't learn it. So I think the attempts that people are making, it's not that they're not trying, they really are trying. They just, if it hasn't been defined for you, actually shown to you what that is, it can be a little bit tricky. I know I grew up in a house where there was no good communicating. Like, good communicating was actually translated into you didn't talk about the problem, right? Like, as long as you stayed pretending like things were a certain way. Now you might have like a screaming, fight, and someone was going to lock themselves in the bathroom, which it was always the same person. But the role modeling was really pretty darn minimal, and that was because I think the Russian culture, the time period, boomer parents and all that. No shade, as in like some people meet those demographics and they chose to change. But I'm just saying that wasn't my house. And so I, making it look good on the outside was kind of the best that I thought of, at least in my first relationship. And so we wanted to make it a little bit or a lot of it practical in terms of what does it look like to have good communication. And turns out that it's the same components of successfully staying out of getting defensive, no matter which masculine or feminine energy you fall into or balanced. The things that we're going to talk about, and they're actually tenets that are really important for both masculine and feminine, but for the masculine, these two major things that we're talking about out of the three is presence, being present for the conversation, and then understanding the purpose of the conversation. So we'll go into kind of what we think of each of those but that's the broad strokes. Essentially, to stay out of defensiveness and communicate well, it's staying present and knowing what the purpose is and keeping track of that.
Now, I think you said something key earlier is you have to understand, number one, what communication is and what is not. Like, it's not yelling, it's not belittling, it's not, being defensive. And unfortunately, a lot of times, I think, we grew up in homes where our parents didn't know how to communicate. So that's our blueprint. However they communicated, some people communicate yelling, some people shut down.
Yes.
That's communication to them. They just go shut down. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today, I just want to tell you now, it may not necessarily be your fault if you don't know how to
Yeah,
communicate, if that makes
right.
sense. And so we just want to throw that out there right now that a lot of what we talk about, we learned.
Yeah.
And we're still learning. Like it's not, it's definitely not over, but we're still learning because I think a lot of times, like I said earlier, we come from places where we don't see a good role model communication and coming back together. You know, you may see slamming doors, you may see
Right.
slamming
Stomping
plates and
around.
slamming a dishwasher, or somebody just leaves. I'll be back when you cool
Yeah,
down.
where your parents like just don't talk for 2 weeks and everybody just knows to tiptoe around the house. Like,
Absolutely.
not really. Yeah, I mean, it runs the gamut. I think what's cool about these two things of being present and understanding the purpose is that it on either side, whether you are bringing up concerns in the communication or the one being on the receiving side, either way, masculine or feminine, I think we do want to stick in this episode with the more common setup, which is the feminine tends to notice some things a little bit more commonly, and we'll talk about why here in a second. And so the masculine is on the receiving end. Now, just remember that may not be the genders in your relationship, as in you might be the physiologically male and be the feminine in your relationship. That is totally fine, right? Like these are energies that we're talking about, not genders. And so as we kind of talk about that, no matter which side, if you're the feminine bringing up stuff or the masculine on the receiving end, is that these two components play a role either way. Because if I, as a feminine, am upset, I first have to be present to a whole lot of stuff just within me to figure out the second thing, which is understand the purpose of the communication that I'm going to have with you. Right. So even just from the get go, before any talking verbally has happened, I'm already thinking through these things. Right. Because it's going to be my inability to stay present where I could come with the bitching and moaning and screaming and slamming the doors.
Yeah.
But if I am present, then it kicks off the thing where I say, well, how do I want to bring this concern up to Jay? And then, of course, you're on the receiving end of both those things.
I think you said something interesting too. Is it's we're talking about energy. Like
Mm-hmm.
I can feel you before you even say you're mad.
Right.
Like just like you say, you don't even say the word, you're getting it all together, but the energy itself, if you're present as the man or the masculine, you can feel when the feminine has something going on.
Yes, absolutely. You do always try, and I mean, just to kind of like pull back the curtain for y'all listening, what it looks like is usually, and I think this has some personal preference, but because I grew up in kind of an emotionally labile and unstable home, I really did not want that as an adult. Like even as a kid, I was always like, I'm not doing that, and
What do you
and
mean?
as in I didn't want to be a screamer and a yeller. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to have that kind of environment in my home because I hated it growing up. And so no, I'm not. I rarely raise my voice. I mean, I get excited and yell, but I mean, to me that's different. Like the intention of yelling is not there. But then I swung the pendulum way too far in in my previous marriage, where I just didn't bring things up. I didn't know about the good communicating. Um, and actually, my ex husband did teach me some good things about communicating. His parents were much more into like self development, and so they actually had taken like courses on relating to each other and things like that. So we learned a little bit more from them. But it was my kind of like insecurities that kept me from speaking up. I'd be like, well, he's tired, he's this, he's that. Like I got so used to the defensiveness that I just fill it in for him, to be honest. That's what it actually looked like. I would just make up the reasons. And I know with you and I, especially in the beginning, I did that where I would like clam up and you'd be like, what's up? It's been like a day of you. And I'm like, I don't know if this is the right thing, because that's kind of the whole thing is I'm being present to myself. And really much more important than me starting to talk is first being like, why am I upset? Is this my programming, your programming, both of ours triggering each other? Like, why am I even pissed? Because some of the things is, and I'll give an example, is like some things have just been about me. I remember we had there was a comment that Jay had made one time in a conversation, and it wasn't about him cheating, but it was like on the topic of cheating, and I went into a bit of a rabbit hole in my head, but you had been accused of like cheating on people in your past, and so I knew in that moment that wasn't just about my inability to bring stuff up. I had to consider the fact that you had already had your own not like super great experience with constantly, being like feeling like that. And that wasn't the time that, I needed to just like go say it. There was a lot of processing that I had to do to say, and only by like it was over the weekend. Like on Sunday, we had a really great conversation. I explained why I needed the time for me to process what I had, because I was like, this is very clearly all me. I don't really need you to interject. I do need you to know what happened, like after the fact. So stuff like that can happen, and it's because of that that I think it really it's worthwhile to ask, like, before anything has happened, are both people kind of have their wits about them? Like, are you in a place to really take some time and say, how do I want to show up in this conversation? And then that way you're not recreating the weird, like, yelling that you didn't like. But I also, then that's how I brought the pendulum back to the middle. Like, instead of swinging the other way over time, I feel like I started being quicker to it. We had conversations where you'd be like, well, you took a day. I mean, like, we got to it here and it was easy to solve. And then I'd be like, oh, I guess I didn't need it. I was so used to like having an ironclad like lawyer argument to the points I was making, that I don't think my brain really got off of that for like a solid year of our relationship. I really just felt like I had to make these like well organized, logical, like concrete points that
Your
like
Google Doc. Y'all remember?
exactly. Yeah, I really that's how I saw it. And so it was with practice, that with us communicating, that I finally was like, oh, I don't need to do that with you. I could just be like, this isn't logical, but I feel this way based off this thing that happened to me. And you'd be like, okay.
And what's interesting is I grew up the opposite. Like, we didn't communicate at all. We didn't say anything. Like, it was just weird. Like, we didn't. I didn't even know. I mean, it's not that. I mean, we would say hi and stuff to each other, but I can't remember any deep conversations about life or anything like that. So I grew up the opposite. I did not communicate, and so for me, which that was a challenge in my marriage, I didn't communicate. Which I did, just being transparent, because we want to be transparent on this show. Part of how I found all this work was I did do some things I wasn't proud of early in my marriage, so that I did things, and
Mm-hmm. Yep.
y'all know what I'm saying. So I did things I wasn't proud of. I can say that
Mm-hmm.
because I did the work. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it's because I wasn't willing to communicate, like cheating, any of that stuff. Stepping out is, you're not really going to your partner telling her what's up. You just would rather go. It's easier to go talk to somebody else. That's what's crazy about it. It's easier for you to go talk to somebody else than to talk to your partner. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
are we doing? Like, this is the person in your house. You sleeping with them, and you can't, for whatever reason, we feel like we can't talk to them.
I
Like, you
know,
can't
right?
communicate with them. You can't tell them your deepest, darkest secrets. And it could be warranted. I mean, they may not be able to handle it. They may not be emotionally stable. But just the concept itself is crazy,
It
that
is.
we're in a relationship with someone, and sometimes it seems like people feel more comfortable talking to people outside of the relationship
Yeah,
about the
they'll
problems
like watch
versus
a
in the
whole other
relationship.
person come out of that person and then like not talk to them. I mean, it is like, if you really think about it, because I worked in a hospital for a long time and I'd see it all the time, and I'd be like, it is wild to me that is the most like vulnerable of experiences, and you can't say, hey, that thing that you did hurt my feelings. So, it's a good point. It's kind of scary when we don't consider it. You could inadvertently end up in like how we did. We weren't doing it on purpose. We just had no thought. It just had never really been thought about. It as like you could fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just always figured if my parents stayed together that long, and that's how bad theirs was, as a kid and like a younger person, I just kind of figured, well, they probably tried, right? Like they probably tried, and just that's how it is. It was only as an adult that I was like, oh, right. Yeah, we all make choices on that. Like that's not an accident on how it happened. And yes, there are other options. And yes, absolutely, we found them and teach them and all that. But like, yeah, I just had no idea that that's what it was. So why do you think, like from a masculine standpoint, why do you think the feminine is always like the one? I kind of said why I think it is, but why do you think the feminine's always the one bringing up the stuff, or often is?
I feel like we're. I think whatever y'all are bringing up sometimes is going to be. By the time y'all bring it up to us, it's gotten emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, because I'm a life coach and I've done the work, a lot of guys hadn't dealt with their emotions. So by the time it comes out to us, it seems like you're coming at us. You're really not. It's just the emotion that you have. You're just very animated. You're just, you're very colorful in telling the story versus our story is bland. And so because I feel like we hadn't processed our emotions a lot of time, or we hadn't come from places that we communicated. Because I mean, the guys were taught that, you're kind of weak to talk about your feelings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole nother episode. Now, you ain't sitting here crying all the time.
Yeah.
Don't do that, fellas. But there are times where you should communicate with your significant other about how you really feel, because she can look at you. She knows you. She can understand something's going on. And so when we lie and say, "Oh, I'm fine," this is a typical thing we say. She knows you're not fine. So one of the things that I've learned is that's an opportunity to come closer when I'm dealing with something that I feel like I need to share with you. We can talk about it, and a lot of times it makes us come closer.
Yeah.
But to answer your
I
question,
say every time, I think.
yeah, you're right about that, and it usually ends well. But that's another story. But my point is, I just feel like we're not taught to communicate, or we feel like it's weak, or we're going to be less than. And I don't know where that comes from, because I didn't communicate growing up, but I really like communicating with you now, just because it takes away the unknown. Like when you don't communicate, you don't know what they're thinking. They don't know what you're thinking.
You're just like making up shit in your head.
Hell yeah, your brain over there saying shit that ain't even really happening. They look at you a certain way, and you like, oh shit, okay, all right, I got you. And then you go make up something to get back, and it's all fake. And if you would just talk about it, say, hey man, what was that look about? Or hey, are you okay? And you talked about why should you bring it up? The feminine bring it up. Well, I've learned that I'm gonna bring it up just because. The thing I've learned, fellas, is the faster you bring it up and talk about it, the better it's gonna be. But previously, I would sense the feminine was having a mood, and I don't want to be around that.
Yeah, like I was always told, like when you're done crying, you can come back and we'll have finish the conversation. Like as if my brain shuts off when I'm crying, and I was always, I mean, I was offended because I should be, because I'm like my brain doesn't does emotion activate different brain centers? Absolutely, but I'm not a different person just because I'm crying. You know what I mean? So yes, it's there's a couple of really great points you're bringing up. For one, I guess, is it even true that the feminine brings up more, or has the masculine just been conditioned not to? That's for one. I
feel like it's the latter.
I can see a little bit of prevalence, as in, I feel like the feminine brain is so interconnected, and so the attention is really multitasking. Like, as in, we can feel the vibe of our partner and the kids and the people in the house, and kind of, and like, oh, I have a timer going for this and here over here. And so it's kind of like we're used to the multitasking, and then so you notice a lot. And so if you are then on top of that conditioned to notice a lot of what's happening in your house, now it even takes the feminine, like it skews it more towards that. Now we're paying attention to everything. And so I think, yeah, I mean, without conditioning, would we all actually end up the same? Probably.
Well, could it be our conditioning that we kind of sort of have a one-track mind, like we're watching a game and not paying attention to everything
I mean, it's
else?
true. I do think the
mowing
feminine
lawn and not paying attention to other things. You know
has
what I mean?
like
We kind
more.
of get locked in on a goal. Could that be just our natural conditioning?
It
that
is.
We
I mean, focus on the mission.
Completing the task.
I think so. I mean, I think there's maybe. I mean, we don't really know the answers, right? Scientifically, we don't know the answer, but it's like there's two options. Either And I think I am with you on this one. I think the feminine leans towards noticing, the masculine leans towards being focused on the mission, singularly, and then the conditioning just makes that all so much worse. And then the other option is we're all the same and it's all just conditioning, but I think probably less likely. But the other thing you bring up is who the onus is on who to bring it up. And I mean, in our relationship, we kind of always, I don't think we talked about it, or we didn't like have a conversation about how this would go, but it was sort of understood that you would bring stuff up more. Like if I was going to talk to you about something and then you were busy with something, you always bring it up to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the things that we decided early on was we were going to communicate, because we just felt like we needed to work on communication in our previous relationships. I know I wasn't the best communicator. I was terrible at communicating. I'll say it. So I was radically honest with you when I first met you. I mean, we had like some real conversations very early on, like sitting there like really quiet, like, okay, should I have just shared that with her? Like maybe I shouldn't have shared that. But we were at a point where we were getting serious about hanging out, and so there's a time and place when you share stuff. I wasn't just sharing everything up front, so I just want to throw that out there. But as I felt us getting closer and closer, I just felt like there were things about my past and just the way I am that I wanted her to know, and I wanted to communicate that, because if she wasn't cool with it, then we needed to part ways. I mean, that's part of the communication as well, is, hey, I'm this way, I do this, and I prefer this. Do you like that? No, because there's certain non-negotiables in a relationship, right? And so we were radically honest about communicating. I think the more honest I was with you, it allowed you to be more honest with me, and it was kind of like a tennis ball. We were just going back and forth. And we got honest, more honest until, that's where we are today.
Yeah, totally. And what's interesting is that with that, even when we've run into problems and then had to like keep talking to work it out, we don't ever create that start of the division. Like how I just think back to my previous, really any previous relationship, and it's always like 1% at a time. Like that conversation, you have that and you're like, oh, that was kind of rude how they talked to me. You never bring it up. And so you're like a little tiny bit more hesitant to bring up the next thing, right? And then you bring it up a little bit hesitantly and they don't respond well again, and you cut it off short because you're like, oh, they're not responding well, right? And then it's just 1% becomes 5%, becomes 30%. Next thing you know, you're breaking up. And I think that was that feeling we weren't going to tolerate. The feeling of separating from each other. So we're like, when we would sit and like not be touching each other, and not like, it's not artificial for us to always hold hands like we do on the show. Like we just do that anyways. And actually, even when we fight, it really helps. When all is lost, just hold hands.
Day one, we've been holding hands.
Right. And so you heard that story as well. Yes, but it's, you just don't allow it to keep. And what we found was that we actually weren't standing all the way together to begin with. We still had like our societally acceptable, like this is how close you can get. And then through kind of like arguing, actually, we got in even closer. Like you're closer to me than anybody else has been, because I mean, like even down to sort of like not very serious things, but like how you always, like if I throw up or something like that, you're always in the bathroom with me, like rubbing my back, bringing me water, putting a cold washcloth. Like I never really had someone hang out in the bathroom with me if I'm getting sick.
Got you, babe.
I know, right? It's really nice. And that's the kind of thing that's not communicating, but that's the kind of thing where had I felt the twitchiness of like, oh no, he's getting closer than I've let some, like that no one normally watches me throw up or whatever, then we would have missed out on all the other stuff that comes, because it's not just closer when you're watching me throw up. That leads to the good sex that feels more connected and intimate. And then we have, right. And so there is actually like massive benefits that we found on the other side. But I did sort of have to like let that happen. You know, I just had to be present with being like, why do I feel weird with that? And is that what I'm going for? Because when I thought about it, I was like, the purpose of you being in here is to help me, not to judge me on how I look or whatever. So if I believe that you're the kind of person that's in there to judge me, why am I with you, right? And then when I answered that question, it was like, but you're not like that. I don't believe that you're like that. And so the purpose really was to feel supported and to get support when I needed it. And so it was like, that was how I was able to do it. Otherwise, I mean, it probably would have felt bad too if I was like, get out.
You raise a good point. Excuse me. You said without judgment. I think that's the thing, is can that person communicate to you without feeling judged? And that's something that we did a really good job of up front. Is, like I said, we told each other some real shit, but we didn't judge each other for the real shit that we told each other. We was like, okay, we've done the work. We actually met in a coaching program, so we knew we were you know, she was working on herself, I was working on myself, and that wasn't all we were doing, but we were very, very transparent about who we were in our past and where we wanted to go, who we are now. We were very, very clear on that. And because there was no judgment, I felt like it allowed us to get closer and closer and closer.
It was true. Now, I think to make it really practical, sometimes people are like, well, I mean, it's like, is my brain judged them? I didn't mean to. I just read it. And you and I can kind of speak to that, in that we have had some things that we shared with each other that we were like then in the second episode, how you were like holding space for me for my emotions around God, but you have significant programming around the church and God and stuff. And so that's that kind of approach where you could really like, you didn't necessarily allow yourself to get super looped into that specificity of the topic. You were going to take my struggle and then make it about your relationship with God. I think I kind of got looped off topic there for a second, but did I bring it back around?
I have no clue. But we can go left. You went left.
Yeah,
we
I know,
were talking
right?
about defensiveness, but one of the things we have on our notes is a good way, fellas, to figure out like when your feminine is coming at you, or what you perceive is coming at you. Let me be careful with my words, ladies. You see how I caught myself?
Nice job. Nice job.
We perceive it as you coming up. You're really not. You're just animated. You paint a picture. Is, hey, do you want my advice or do you want me to listen? That's a really good question before you start anything. Once she decides to open up, once you get the communication going, because the reason you want to ask that question, because a lot of times they don't need us to fix it. But as guys, we want to fix it. The minute you start telling a story, because we want to fix stuff, and you're not necessarily the thing I've learned is most of the time they don't need you to fix it. They just want you to listen. They just need an ear to bounce it off of. They just need a sounding board. They just need to get the emotions and the feelings out. And so a good question, fellas, something practical that you can use is, do you want my advice or do you want me to listen? And she will tell you literally, hey, man, I just want your advice. Or she will say, I want your advice. Or she'll say, hey, just listen. And she told you what to do, so just listen.
Yeah, I think on that topic, sometimes we go into it, and we're not trying to do this, but sometimes you are processing an event, and especially the earlier you bring up and the less processing you've done on your own, as in like to sit with the emotion and to like think about the trigger and to kind of digest all what happened. If you come to that conversation, oh my gosh, I keep losing my train of thought. What were you saying on the?
You want me to listen, or you want my advice?
Oh yeah, the fact that it could change, right? Like the conversation might start out with venting, and then sometimes what I discover is after I vented, a question comes out. So I think that's part of why we say presence comes first, is because if you are like just trying to get to the end of the conversation and you're like, she's just venting, got it, and you're like, I don't have to listen because I don't have to respond, you might be in trouble when the need shifts to I need advice and you have not been listening to know how to help, right? And then if if that's the case and you pop into that, then she will know in that moment that you were not listening, and you can't give any advice that like takes the nuances into account, because that's the whole thing. We believe we're talking for a reason. It's all inner world. Like, I think men look at it more, and historically it's been like, oh, they just talk. Women need to talk. But women, we are talking for what we perceive is a purpose. Now, that may just be to connect over a shared experience. So that might not be like the purpose that the masculine is going for, but it's still for a purpose. So that's why it's like, it's always kind of offensive if someone's not listening, because there was a reason you were expending oxygen and stuff.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I think that goes back to respecting your partner.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you have a filter, especially if you have bad communication in the past. Anything that's coming out of their mouth seems like it's a shot at you, or you get defensive, just depending on how you guys have communicated in the past. So we're going to start anew. We got to change that filter, get the Windex, clean it off, and start seeing it through a different filter. Like, is she just want to tell me something, or does she really need advice in this moment? And in most cases, she will directly tell you, yeah, I need your advice on this, or no, I just need you to listen. And we have to take that and just listen and be present, because fellas, I'm gonna tell you, she gonna ask you something later about that story, and
Absolutely.
your butt wasn't listening. And now, like you said, she know
problems.
you wasn't listening. Now you got two problems. She like, did you not hear anything I said? And I'm guilty. I used to do this shit. I ain't heard nothing they said.
I know.
It's
right?
funny now, but it's not funny. But it's like, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, we're looking at you, but we ain't listening. You know what I'm saying? And so it's important that you're not just listening with your eyes, because I think sometimes we get good at just looking at you like we're listening, but we're really not.
Oh my God, you guys get good. You and my ex have been. Oh my God.
Yeah, we do it.
Oh Lord.
We got skills. So we look at you like we're listening, but we're really not. So fellas, we have to get good at looking at them, but actually listening to what they're saying. Tell me more. What else? What else happened? And they'll tell you what else. And then once you get to the end, she always be like, man, I feel so much better. Thank you for letting me talk, or something like that. And now I know she's in a good place and we can move forward. But it's very, very important to let her get that out and not interrupt. And even on our paper, we've talked about it, but we keep getting off topic, get defensive, like taking that on, like she's talking to you. She's not talking to you. She's probably just needing to talk.
Yeah, there's a difference between venting and I just need you to listen. Right? When I say vent, then this is just my personal definitions of it, but I think a lot of like this is the kind of detail you're getting to know in your girl is or in your feminine is like where the venting is sort of like my friend pissed me off and it's not a big enough deal, or I don't have the opportunity to go have this conversation right now, and so I just am processing, and you are present and helping me process, right? And then at the end, in those situations, a lot of times I will ask for advice, because usually the thing is like I can't take enough action to fix the thing, and then usually in having vented it out, I land on, okay, but I have to still figure out what I'm going to do with this. Like the person might not change, but I have to decide. So then I'm going to get to like an advice needing point or something to do in the physical. The I just need you to listen, though, is so often a time where we have already digested the issue, but we need you to know. For example, like we have had this where let's say you weren't necessarily listening super well, and I have done, but I know that there's a lot going on, and like you didn't sleep well the last 3 nights. We've had a ton of events that we were putting on and hosting. We're, doing stuff with the kids. Like a million things are going on, and like you're busy and you're trying to work on something. In that moment, the first of all, I'm not even going to register, right? Because I'm like, it's cool. I know why. That comes back to being present and understanding the purpose. I know what's going on, so I'm not going to there's nothing to say. It's cool. But let's say it's gone on long enough, or there's been enough where I'm like, okay, now at this point it's a problem, right? Like my feelings are starting to get into it. Like I'm starting to get irritated. It's starting to feel like the whole, it's just
Was
going
that
around a
yesterday? I
loop.
was like that yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
I was all
today.
over the place, and today.
That's
Okay,
how we kind of, this is why the topics are so
for
like
real.
for
Yeah, I
real
was all
because,
over the place.
right. And so in that moment, sometimes it's like, this is what the conversation sounds like, and I'll role model the defensiveness too, right? And this isn't Jay, I'm exaggerating for effect. But let's say I'm like, hey, babe, I just really I just have some things to say. Could you listen? I know you're not doing it on purpose. I know you're really tired. I know you're working a lot. We've had a lot of stuff going on. Just really feel like I've had a hard time being able to tell you stuff, and I have to repeat myself like 3 times. And I'm just feeling kind of bummed out about it. Could we like work on it in the future? So then, the defensiveness is stuff like, you always accuse me of not listening. It's like she just said in that whole thing exactly why she wasn't even asking for an apology or anything. Like she had already excused all the behavior and was just talking about the future.
We don't hear that
Right,
sometimes, though.
exactly. Or it'll be like, well, what do you want me to do? And she'll be like, nothing. I said it's for next time. So, well, what are we even talking about then? Why are we having this conversation? Because I told you
That sounds
that
like
you.
Jay. What you talking about, girl? No.
I'm exaggerating. He's not that bad. He's being hard on himself. But like, yeah, that's the like, and that kind of defensiveness goes in a loop. I think there's the you never, you always. I mean, I think both sides have to watch that because it's hard to not be defensive if someone says you always. Like in my example,
Generalizations.
the person is really they're like fighting for not getting into a fight with you because they're telling you all the things that they're taking into account on your behalf. So usually then in that case, that's where the defensive, picking any one of those tangible things and using it like, but I didn't sleep well, especially if they just said that, y'all are going to fight. I mean, I don't know how else that, generally speaking, because the only other option that the feminine has at that point is to walk away. And depending on the masculine's programming, that is not going to happen. You know what I mean? If someone's like, no, let's finish the conversation, there's no fucking way. I mean, that conversation is going to be a fight until that person hears what you're saying because there's no other way to it.
And I think it's important to understand that when I'm like that, you're not attacking me. You're talking about my behavior. And that's a
Right.
big distinction.
And an isolated behavior because more than, and to you, you do such a good job of like taking care of me, treating me well. I don't have a complaint. So when I'll be like, this weekend, I don't feel like you've listened well. Now we've gotten into some where you're saying I don't listen well, and I'm like, whoa, hold on, I'm just talking about literally this weekend, and in that regard. But yeah, that is, you're right on the it, depending on how I say it, it runs the risk of that happening more frequently or less. I feel like the more I spend time sharing what I think your point of view could be. No, I still need you to say it, but like the more I put that in, it seems like the easier it is.
I feel like I appreciate it when you put it like that. It's like, I know you had slept good. I know you've been doing a bunch of appointments. I know you got this. I'm like, all right. Then what are you gonna say? Now again, I'm listening the whole time.
Yeah.
And so when you preface it like that, it makes me feel like you understand me. So I'm more apt to listen to what you have to say after that. Whatever criticism, it's kind of like the sandwich. You kiss them, kick them, kiss them. You know what I mean? I think you've been sandwiching me, but I'm more receptive to whatever you're gonna say because you've acknowledged. Like for me, I know I'm ADD, so it's not like I'm not taking that personal. I'm not like, I'll be like, you know what, babe, you are right. Because I'll play back in my head like, dang, she did try to say, hey, Jay, I need to talk to you about this. You got a minute? I'm like, well, hold on. Then I go do something else. She's like, hey, remember I need to talk to you about that thing? And I'm like, oh, man, I forgot. And you're like, hey, I'm like, so by the time you're saying that, I know I've been ADD. And I know, so like I said, I appreciate it. And I think guys do appreciate when it's framed where you're coming from a place of understanding what we're doing as a masculine, like going out working
Yeah.
and building businesses or your job, whatever you're doing to provide for your family. Y'all appreciate that, but we also appreciate you guys when you have a challenge and you want to communicate to us that it's communicated in a respectful manner.
It's true. And I think that's where, asking yourself, what's the purpose of this? Because sometimes, and I've seen this play out, is that sometimes you're just wanting to like punish the other person, right? And to actually have them feel bad for the thing. And I think that's where we just have to be careful where if you're starting to get into that, it starts a conversation of why are you in that relationship where you do not see, like, if you're not willing to fight for their best at any given time, like, of course I would want to see where you're coming from, and the fact that you're not doing it just to be annoying and hurt me. Because if you're just doing stuff to annoy me and hurt me, there
Why
is
are we
no
together?
relationship. Yeah, like, I mean, there's a fake one, but it's like there's nothing good from that. That's not like what God wanted when he, like, you know, created the thing or whatever your model of the world is on that topic. But like, I just don't believe that that's supposed to be the case. But I feel like you have some other things that you do to stay present and stuff. Like, what do you do when you feel like I'm coming at you and you're like continuing to stay present?
Me personally, I like to breathe. I like to try to like slow down and just look in your eyes and like I'll grab your shoulders, both shoulders. Sometime I'll be like, all right, talk to me.
Yeah.
And so there's just different techniques that I've learned
Yeah.
that it slows me down to be able to listen because my mind is always, I need to do this, I need to call this person, I need to do this, I need to do that. So a lot of times when I'm just like, or you may sometimes you like grab my face, my
Yeah.
chin, and kind of turn like, hey babe, I need to talk to you. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I know. So part of that, I mean, part of what we're talking about is you just know me.
Yeah.
So you're not holding against me being ADD. Like that's just who I am. Like that's what you signed up for. So
Yeah.
sometimes we're with a partner and they're like that, and you're getting mad at them. Like, dude, that's just how they are. Like that's just one of the things that
like I talk a lot. Like it was not gonna go away. It's like
Yeah.
I've talked before I knew language. Like I just made noise.
Yeah, for sure. So part of that is we know each other, and when you bring something to me, I don't take it personal because I know you know me, and you're not coming at me to belittle me or make me feel bad. You're just saying, "Hey, babe." Essentially, what you're saying is, I need your presence. Like you hadn't been present. Like you just passing me by. You hadn't given me any of your presence, and so that's my cue to say, "Oh, let me lock in. Let me give her my presence," because we're giving everybody else in the world our presence. We're giving it to our jobs. We're giving it to our clients. We're giving it to our kids. We're giving it to all these different places. It's only right that our partner gets our presence too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I did remember what I was going to say about the whole if you end up judging them, because like that is actually an example. You might be like, I am okay with a little like neuroatypical things in the brain, but sometimes you might find yourself judging, and I think that's where in those situations you and I actually just share with each other I am, because like we believe that the other person feels each other. So that's why it's not a viable solution for us to pretend like we're not. Sometimes it's more to be like, from my past, it's harder for me to get over to that idea. It's going to take me a second to get over there. And I think that really helps as a part of the conversation, because shoot, you might have the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, my parents said that's a terrible thing to do, or my ex-husband, ex-wife said blah 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 last time and that got me in a lot of trouble. So you're just sort of sharing. It's a way of depersonalizing your own reaction, as in my reaction was also programmed by somebody else. So I am still here with you, but I am also clocking in that we have this other thing to contend with, and I'm not directing it at you personally. I feel like that has gone a long way for actually allowing us to be like, we know it's a little, a sticking point, but it doesn't have to be a cause for discord. We're just like, we'll have to talk about that idea and to think about what we want to do with it.
Yeah,
Stuff like that.
we do a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see you a lot of times like put away your phone if we're gonna have a conversation. And then I think one thing that does is not necessarily what you do, but I think that you allow me the space, and that comes down to for the feminine or even the masculine for bringing it up. Let's say the masculines should bring things up more if without conditioning. Um, is what oh my gosh, I am like completely losing my train of
Bring
thought
yourself
today.
up.
Yeah, but what was I talking
The masculine or feminine, bringing stuff up. I don't know. If I was reading your mind, I was gonna say
about?
a lot of times if there's something going on, I just bring it up. Like I can just tell your energy. I just know your energy. And this just comes from knowing your partner. I just know how you are. I know when you're happy. I know when you're middle of the road. I know when you're sad. So whenever that energy is not on 10, when you're not hugging me, when you're not kissing me, I'm like, okay, something's wrong. I'm like, what's up? You're like, nothing. I'm like, no, what's up? You're like, nothing.
Oh yeah,
I'm giving y'all some game, fellas.
you did remind me
You're
too.
like, no. And I'm like, babe, what's up? And you're like, well, I really don't want to talk about it. I'm like, I know, but what's up?
Yeah.
Because I know she needs whatever that is, she needs to get it out. And the sooner she gets it out, it's going to be good for her, it's going to be good for me, and it's going to be good for us. What were you going to say before you
Yeah,
forget?
it came back to me. You give me basically. I think anybody, any adult, should be able to also process their emotions and triggers and stuff on their own. And so, if you do not have solutions and resources for that, shoot us an email, right? Support at rocksandOceanspodcast.com. But and we'll help you out, because sometimes where my hesitation is well, not sometimes, always, my hesitation is more on the side of there's a hefty component of my own stuff in there, right? Like, and me, I'm talking, if I get mad at you for not listening, I also have to consider that I grew up feeling not heard as a kid. And so it's a little suspicious, right? Anytime me as an adult clocks me thinking that, I go, oh, no, I still need to unpack something in me. It's coming from, the murders inside the house. But right, it's still me process. And I think that there's a lot of power in that, as in, I don't think it's a very safe feeling life when we feel like we need somebody else to be able to process something. Do I benefit a lot of processing with you? And do I want you to know about everything? Absolutely. That's cool. But I think my energy is different coming to you because I know I'm perfectly capable of also handling it if I need to. Not that I want to, but if I need to, I got it. And I think that actually alleviates the whole energy component. So we talked about breathing. We talked about like how you position your body, where you have your phone, kind of things like that, your mindset coming into it. But I think the energy you have to consider too is that one thing we found in having like the triggers show up in our conversations, the defensiveness, it was almost always started before any words were spoken. My energy was like, ooh, I'm on 10. And then you were already like halfway not present.
I'm bracing for your team.
Yeah, you're like, but it's like a foot out the door. So he's feeling the ocean do its ocean ragey thing, but I'm feeling the 1 foot out the door. So what does that conversation end up being? I won't start the conversation with here's how, I mean, even if I do, and I say, oh, here's how I account for the fact that, you were really distracted and you weren't listening well or whatever. Even if I say all that stuff, if you don't feel like you can withstand my ocean, I just don't really have a shot at it. Do you know what I mean? Like some parts of that we're talking about, the breathing and the mindset, is you have to be thinking that kind of stuff like day to day, because you don't know when a trigger is going to pop up and you're going to get into a thing.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm just sitting here thinking about sometimes you're already as the other party tensed up before, like you
Yeah.
said, the words even come out. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh shit, what's about to happen? And nothing's even happened, and it might not even be that bad. But again, we're playing
Mm-hmm.
this scene in our head that, and again, to me, it's just because we hadn't done the work on ourselves. We have these traumas in our past, and we have low self worth in some cases, or low self esteem. And anytime someone's trying to talk to you, it's like they're coming at you. They're
Yeah.
really not. They're just trying to talk to you. And that's a big thing that I learned is people are just trying to talk to you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's the behavior that we're talking about. It's not you.
Right.
It's the behavior. It's the non-communicating. And I want to say this too. It's not it's not something that's easy. We still working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're not sitting here like we the communication gurus, but I do feel like our our we come together a lot quicker than we used to. Like
Mm-hmm.
it used to, like it may be a day between us coming together. Well, we never went a day really, never 24 hours, but
Not 24 hours, but like within the full day, like
yeah,
waking day.
but it gets down to like I can sense she's feeling some type of way in an hour, and we start talking about an hour, 2 hours later, we good.
I think it's because of that energy thing. I think there's an inherent feminine like hissiness that happens when your energy is perceived like you're just gonna fuck them up, because then it pisses. I think it just inherently pisses us off. Is like, why do you, if I can just come bowl you over, like how are you gonna protect me from anything, right? Like
That's true.
that is, now that's not a conscious thought. So I think the energy of it is like, this isn't safe. If I come home because my boss pissed me off and I'm slamming the cupboards while I'm putting away the dishes, and I'm not even mad at this hypothetical partner, but it's the partner being like, well, my mom used to come home really mad and then I'd get it, right? And they're playing that out. I think the feminine in that situation will always feel like the mom and will be perceived as the mom. And I think in some ways, sometimes that energy sweeps the couple into this weird parenting kid dynamic where it's like the feminine's telling him what to do all the time and like doing the guiding and all this stuff, and it just goes really wonky after that. But I think if the masculine can cultivate in him like how you have, you just don't seem twitchy, and so it doesn't seem like I'm doing it. There's no part of me that seems like you can't handle it, right? Like it's not to that
I
lack of
like the way you
safety.
put that. As the masculine, we have to be able to handle your emotions, and she has to know you can handle them, or she's not gonna bring them back. Like if you can
Or
handle them,
the sexy time.
exactly. You have to be able to handle the emotion, and this is not easy, guys. Like I'm still working on it right now, but as you practice, and you have to be willing to practice, you can get better. But um it's not something that you're gonna get one time. It's not something, and I think part of it is both people have to want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's times where we just hung in there, and it
Yeah.
was very very uncomfortable, but we
Oh
like, man, we
man.
gonna get this resolved. Like we're not going to sleep.
Yeah,
Excuse
like
me.
we're
We're
not
not going
just
to
gonna
sleep like
leave
this.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
no, we're going to talk about this. And one party is trying to shut it down. We like, nah. The other party's like, no, because we had that initial agreement that we're going to communicate. We're not going to go to sleep like that because we've done that in previous relationships. And over time, that's just a recipe for disaster. That's
Mm-hmm.
not a recipe to come together and bake a good cake. That's a
Yeah.
recipe to have a falling cake. That makes sense.
Yeah,
All over the
it
country.
sure
Take
does.
one
Yeah.
ingredient out, it ain't working.
Yeah, it's like the start and end of it's always energy, because it starts when the energy starts flowing between y'all, not when you start talking. And so, the feminine runs, most likely she's going to run the risk of scaring the masculine. And right. And so the masculine, I guess the question is, do you want to be scared? And like, what do you want to do about that? But then oh my God.
I got you. Well, I'll say this is the word I've heard is unperturbable. Is you can't get perturbed, meaning you can't be bothered by her emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is what you were saying, but I'm just gonna pick it up till you figured out what you were gonna say. Is
Yeah, it's
those emotions are real. Sometimes they're very very raw. But the thing that I've learned is kind of like if y'all have ever seen when the hurricanes are coming, you see the weatherman out there and it's like blowing, he's like blowing over, and that's kind of how feminine is to the
Yeah.
masculine. It's like you that weatherman as the masculine in that storm, and that wind's blowing, the water's on your face. But if you can hold the space in that moment, it gives her the opportunity to come to you again and again and again because you're strong. It's just like those palm trees. They don't ever break. I mean, I guess that's a good example. We're the palm trees. Like you might lean over and they they look crazy, but the palm trees are always still there when the hurricane's over. And so for lack of a better example, we're that palm trees. When that storm is coming, I need to just listen, um, understand, empathize without judgment so that you can have that space to discharge that energy. And then what happens is then you have that good energy on the backside that you're talking about.
Yes, and okay, I thought of it, guys. We're back. I've been
We
working
got
a
you.
lot and didn't sleep good.
Good.
But the energy on the backside is what you're essentially, that's going to be the check. Are you done talking? Because if it feels off between you two, you're not done talking. That's the final say on like what is actually happening. Because you don't, I think it's easy to get to an impasse and be like, well, agree to disagree. And the question is, but do you want to fuck each other? And if you don't, then you're like, you don't want to come together, right? Like that kind of thing. Yet, and your energies are not simpatico like that. And so that's what I'm always feeling for. Now, it's more of a rhetorical question. Do you want to have sex? Because, so if we've had a really intense conversation or whatever, even if we wrap up nice, I might just want to snuggle or whatever. But the answer to that question tells me where my energy's at. If I could comfortably get there and be like, oh, we like snuggle and hug it out, that's great. But if I don't want to, more than likely, there's still something about my energy that doesn't feel like it wants to come towards you.
And that's on both sides.
I think men are like, oh, sure, I'll take sex whenever. And it's like, you can have sex even when you kind of don't feel like it. But the much more important answer is the real answer. You didn't really feel like it, so you're not done with the communication. Something more still needs to be said or acknowledged or listened for. And I think I recognize it in you, and I don't know how you perceive it from the inside, but I notice a big change in your demeanor. Like a lot of times when it's more of the defensiveness, there's like a pressure to your speech. Or like a hurry kind of feeling and that starts to sort of dissipate when we're coming to an agreement where like if we need to take like 15 minutes for a break or a processing or something, you're like, okay, that's cool. Whereas when I think you're really in it, most of the time you're not super loving that idea and things like that. So that's how I perceive it just from actions on the outside. Do you feel it? Like, can you describe how you feel it?
I think it's I feel like when the conversation gets intense, a lot of times, if it's too intense, the tendency is to want to shut it down, and that's where you hear the hurried speech and
like you're trying to fix it.
I'm done talking about this. Like, why are you still talking? And I've even said that before. Like, why are we still talking about this? Like, and it to me, it's going around and around. But if she's still talking about it, it's not done. Yeah. Regardless of how I feel, it's not done.
Right.
And so.
Well, and especially I think for a lot of times the medicine says then it's like, well, 30 seconds ago you still had something to say, so I'm not really believing you. Like, we just don't believe y'all. Like, we know you're lying and you're not actually done and that you just artificially want to shut down. But, like that's how I track it.
And even in this case, this is a good place to interject, like how we communicate. Let's say I do feel defensive. I've said, all right, baby, I do feel defensive. You're right. I'm getting defensive. Because we're trying to resolve it. This ain't about who's right or who's wrong. I think too many times the communication is who's going to win this conversation. It ain't about winning no conversation.
Y'all both going to lose.
Man, ain't nobody fucking.
Yeah.
Nobody tonight. And so exactly. I don't know about y'all, but I'm trying to. And so it's important to come back together. And like I said, it's just been a beautiful thing in our relationship that we can talk and know exactly where each other is. We don't go to bed wondering, is she still mad over there? Like, I don't know if y'all ever went to sleep where one's facing the other wall and the other one's facing, you got your back to each other in the
Many,
bed.
many a nights.
You know what I'm saying? And you
Previously.
wonder, are they mad over there? I wonder, they still up over there. Like, you thinking they sleeping, but y'all both still up thinking about the argument. And so, but we go to bed. By the time we get done, we snuggle, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, all right. So, and then we wake up the next day, and it's a beautiful thing. And so, I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely worthwhile. I mean, I know like it sounds trite to say like to be present, breathe, slow down your, action, like can you sit still? Can you I can also tell if the energy is scaring Jay a little bit because he'll move things around from like one counter to another counter, from like one table to the bed, or the bed to the table, or something like that. Like you'll notice. I'm just pointing out like what are the things people do. I fidget. I pick at my nails and I start biting them. You've caught me being like, why are you
You look
doing
straight
that?
ahead. I know
I don't
when
make
you
eye
got that straight
contact.
look, I'm like, oh shit. You just have this certain straight look, like your eye, you ain't smiling. It's just,
Like,
I know. Oh shit, I don't know. What's up, babe? Nothing. No shit. No, I know that look. Like, it's like I'm not gonna say that.
the nothing. What I should work on saying is, I'm not ready yet with a statement. Like I haven't, because I mean that is, and it's fair
That's a good
enough
point too.
where
When you
it.
say I'm not ready to talk yet.
Right, because I'm still thinking about what I need to be present to. If I'm just having a whole slew of different emotions going in, and I'm mad, but I also feel guilty that I'm mad, but I also feel angry that I feel guilty that I'm mad. Well, hell, it's going to take me, 15 minutes of walking around, maybe looking ahead to be like doing that. But I think I feel good about my behavior because I'm always like, I may be not clear on this, but I am not saying anything disrespectful. I'm not doing anything disrespectful. I am not, it might not be like the most welcoming, but I know for a fact when I'm not doing any of the bad stuff either. Right? Like
I
I'm
appreciate
just
that too.
considering it.
I appreciate it because I can tell when you're wording the sentences to make sure you don't offend me. And it's probably because I've been defensive in the past, but I appreciate it. I'm like, oh, I can just tell the way you're wording it. You're trying to be careful. Like, I know you didn't sleep good the last couple nights. I know you've been on a lot of appointments. I know. I'm like, oh shit. It's just the way you start saying it. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Oh. But she's trying not to offend me, and I appreciate that. So, lady, it is important how you say it
Yeah.
to us as guys because our thing is respect. We don't want to feel
Yeah.
disrespected. Like, we probably don't want to hear what you're saying either, which we have to learn to do that, which is why we're talking about this on the podcast. Because
Mhm.
us communicating, figuring out what's important to you and what's important to me, that's how we have a good relationship. When I
Right.
know what she likes, she know what I like. We don't need porn and cheating and all the other stuff. We just do it with each other. But
Right.
most people, because they don't communicate, that's why you're looking at porn, you cheating, because you're not being 100% authentic in that relationship. And so I feel like we do a good job of it, and I like it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a good point. On the I think we're playing a tit for tat kind of thing in society now, where it's like, well, men do this, so women do this, but men are like, but women do that. I mean, I think we'll probably come back to this point time and time again, but ultimately, we believe the masculine's the leadership. So, how if you're the masculine listening, how can you be the start of the good? I think for the feminine, I see a lot of people talking about respect and whether their men, have earned their respect and things like that. And I think as the feminine, we really only have, since we're not setting the tone, it really is only a question of ever how much access are you giving somebody, right? And if what you're saying is repetitively like you don't respect him, you don't want to respect him, you resent saying the words that would allow him to feel respected to work on it, that's probably your answer. right? Like you're just saying, I don't want to. But then in that case, it's easier because I think so often we say we don't want to, and then we go cry about like, why doesn't this man want to be with me? But let's just be real here. You don't want to do this stuff. You don't want to be with him. Right? Like if you don't, I just don't know how else to say it. It's kind of like a man liking and loving his wife. Not just loving, but also liking. Right? Like if he doesn't want to work at liking his wife or doing nice things to show her love, it's the same question. Why are you with her? Now, we're not on that topic, but on this one, on respect for the feminine, that is the ultimate answer. You don't want to walk the path with him, you don't have to. Go do your own
That's
thing.
communication too. Like
That right there, yeah.
you may not like each other as you get to talking,
Yeah.
and the right thing to do, the above board thing to do, is to say, "Hey, man, this ain't really working for me. Why don't we figure out how to consciously decouple
Yeah.
ourselves?"
That is such that. Thank you for bringing that up because I remember this was such a thing in my divorce. I remember I struggled with it for a long time. I mean, because I didn't like believe in divorce, right? I wasn't ever trying to go there, but I would just do the round and round. Like this is not what it's supposed to be like. This is not going well. It's not good. I just do round and round and round and round. And eventually, one thing I realized was that ultimately the entire ability for us to keep going the way that it was like looked good on the surface enough, like I was like, oh, I'm going to have to like, take this all apart because it's quote unquote working. Um, I realized I'm like, it's not actually even, I'm not doing any of the stuff to say it's working. Like, if I'm not communicating or sharing, essentially, I have to just pretend that I'm happy and not me. And that's what I'm calling this relationship working. And I was like, man, that can't happen because I can't say something is working and be that, and he doesn't even know me. Like I have not even given the man a full chance. I mean, yeah, we had 17 years, we had a chance, but like I wasn't sharing fully. So that was the thing. I was like, the way I'll figure out how to get divorced is we'll start talking. And we had conversations, and I'd cry, and he'd be like, "I'll talk to you later," or he'd be like, I remember the moment we had the conversation. He was like, but I thought this is the best we've been doing. You hardly ever bring stuff up. Like, as in, he was saying, oh, you don't complain to me all the time. At that point, if your girl's not doing this kind of stuff that you need this episode for, it may be over. I don't know how else to say that politically correctly, but that's by the time we're done bitching and complaining and quote unquote coming at you for anything, the relation we're out of there mentally. And there's a lot. We were going to talk about breakups for feminine and masculine too, because we deal with it so differently. It takes us forever and a day to leave. I mean, that's mostly where we go wrong, but it just takes us forever we have to be like done before we physically leave. And so I think that it really ended up expedite. That's how I got my answer. I just started saying stuff. We started fighting. I'd be like, no, I mean, I just haven't been bringing stuff up because I've been thinking about divorce and stuff. And then that started a whole conversation like, oh, okay, well, that's where we're at. And ultimately he was like, it's not good. It was just, we weren't yelling at each other, and like we didn't really yell. We weren't arguing with each other and whatever, or walking around all weird. We just started having conversations that were uncomfortable, and over time it just showed like we did not want the same things, and you could only see that when you're being honest.
Yeah.
And so in some ways it's like the answer to all the problems,
True story.
no
And
matter
the
where
first
you
person you
end
got to
up.
be honest with is just self.
Ain't that the truth? That might have to be a
Something
separate
you
one.
shared, and we're gonna wrap up here in a second, but you said people don't know the real you, and so that can be scary. I mean, but bringing a real you into the world is worth it, and that starts with communication. Is I don't like this, I don't like this, I do like this, I don't like that, and once you can learn to start communicating, and it's not easy. It's not easy to communicate, especially if you've never done it. But I will say it is worth it.
It's so worth it. I used to always cry when I was sharing any opinions that I had that anyone was going to disagree with. And so if you're in that boat, I can just say, as you do it, it will pass. I promise. As you, it's essentially the fear of your response turning bright red, stuttering over your words, crying, whatever. All that stuff is just you having a hard time, being vulnerable. And it's perfectly valid to have your body freak out a little bit. So don't be surprised if you feel some like physical symptoms that pop up as you head towards that way. It does feel very scary. I think that's why the flip side is so sweet.
Yeah, because as you do it more and more, you get better and better. It's like going to the gym. When you first go to the gym, you can barely lift any weights, and then you go in there, you can lift more and more and more. Same thing with communicating. Initially, it seems super duper hard to say anything about how you really truly feel.
Yeah.
But then the more and more you do that, the more authentic you are, and the more authentic it allows your partner to be, because you reap what you sow. As you were talking, that's what I was thinking. You reap what you sow. Is like when we came into it, I mean, I had to lead it, but I was like, I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't care what it is. I'm telling about everything. But that allowed you the space to be the same way. You like, okay, he being authentic, I'm gonna be authentic, and it's a beautiful thing as it just keeps building and building and building, and now we're very transparent with each other. I don't have a problem telling you about anything.
Right. Yeah. Because I think there's the fact that the reality is the relationship is built on who we actually are and the things that come up for us, like the problems and the sticking points and the insecurities. Like, the things that go through my head about certain subjects that are really private that I've never shared anywhere. And that's the kind of thing of, as I really live the experience of showing myself and having you love it and honor it and like respect me and treat me well and all that stuff. I mean, it literally, like, I feel like I had the healing. Like, I got healed through that process because I got to have a real tangible answer. The answer is yes, that like I am inherently lovable by being myself, and you are proof, and vice versa. Right? So how much more can you accomplish in life when you are loved and accepted and cared for and things like that? That's the real power, right? Like, what could you, instead of arguing against each other, what can you accomplish as a couple in this world for like whatever you're passionate about, or hobbies, businesses, whatever you got, but like, how could we spend more time on that instead?
I like that, baby. So
Yeah.
I just want to challenge y'all out there listening. Go have a hard conversation.
Yeah.
Just go try it. Just try it on for size. Just see how it works. Because I promise, as you keep doing it, you'll get better and better at communicating, and then that allows your partner to get better and better at communicating. And before you know it, you're gonna have a relationship that you're proud of.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear that what actually happens next when you go have the conversation. So you can either shoot us an email, that's the support at rocksandOceanspodcast.com, or you can shoot us a DM. We're on TikTok, same name, and and YouTube, Rocks and Oceans Podcast.
And you can like and subscribe for more. And if you guys have topics that we need to talk about, or any comments about this episode that we left out, please drop them in the comments, because we do look at them and we want to create more content like this to help the world. And so thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time. Thanks for listening to the Rocks and Oceans podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend that could use this information. Please also subscribe and leave us a review so that more people can find this work. You can also find us over at YouTube and TikTok at Rocks and Oceans Podcast. Let's build a happier and more powerful world together.